It shifts everything. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to today's video where we're going to be talking about the difference between true stagnancy, like actually being stagnant in your life, actually needing to motivate yourself, actually needing to move yourself forward in some way in order to grow or change or shift or make your life better, and living in enough life that you're just being told is stagnancy. Because the reality is that we live in a culture that, in my opinion, is totally inverted from real reality. Okay? So before we even get into any of this, are you living a stagnant life? Are you living an enough life? Is what you're doing good enough? Is what you're doing not good enough? We need to look at the lens through which we are making this decision in order to really understand whether or not we are making a good decision for ourselves. Okay? So the lens that we have in the Western world, especially, about what stagnancy is versus what a good enough life is, and if you're actually doing what you should be doing, is all the lens of capitalism. Okay? The capitalist structures that we are functioning within right here, right now, in the Western world, which are fully and completely set up for maximum exponential profit for those who own the means of production. Okay? This is what we need to understand, is the fundamental structure, the water we're all swimming in. That what we are trained to value as a society is that which leads to the exponential profit margin increase of corporations. That is the model that we are working with. That is the lens through which we are viewing everything. This is how we are determining what has value and what does not have value. Does it help create exponential profit growth for corporations? Okay? Governments are all pretty much set up in order to try to help make this happen. Education systems, all of our working systems, the way we distribute resources, access, wealth, the way we are indoctrinated to value beauty, how things look on the outside, how productive we are, what kind of production we're doing, what is high-level work, what is low-level work. It's all being filtered through this filter, this lens of, does this thing increase the profit margins of our corporations? And when we can fully understand that that is the system we are working with, okay, that is how everything is being determined right now in our Western culture, we can start to see why this is not a good way of viewing the world. This is not a good way of viewing ourselves. This is not a good way of understanding our own value. And we can start to understand why there's so much shame and guilt in our culture. We can start to understand why there's so much anxiety and depression in our culture. We can start to understand why there's so much poverty and people going without, even though we have literal billionaires who have so much more money and resource and access than they will ever need for their all generations that come after them until the sun explodes. And yet we still have massive portions of the population who aren't able to make ends meet. When we can understand this concept, that everything is set up for profit margin increase for corporations, this is how we're going to start to understand, again, where our value systems are messed up, not because we chose messed up value systems, but because we've been handed messed up value systems. Where our view of ourselves is incorrect, where our judgments of other people are incorrect, and where we are living in alignment, again, with values and systems that are inverted in terms of their actual pragmatic capacity to support that which has value, which is life. Okay? So right now, our systems are inverted in terms of how they function compared to how real reality works. In real reality, the thing that has ultimate value is life. You, your family, your friends, every person you've ever met, the planet, animals, plants, anything that is part of our ecosystem, that is alive, that is supporting life, that is a part of life. In real reality, this is what has value. If we boil it down and we just understand, what are we even doing all of this for? The ultimate answer that we should get to is that we all want to live a happy, enjoyable life. We want to have nice experiences. We want to connect with each other. We want to be creative. We want to have fun. We want to have pleasure. We want to relax. Yes? This is the ultimate reason that we are all doing what we are doing. This is why we're all people pleasers. This is why we all want to be loved and approved of. This is why we all work hard and try to make ourselves good by society standards, all this stuff. It all comes down to we're doing it because we think we have to do it in order to have an enjoyable experience of being alive. That's what we want. Connection, enjoyment, expression. Ultimately, this is what the human being is searching for. And the more we start to understand about how life works, the more we are going to see that in order to have this be a functional and sustainable thing, the idea of having a nice life, human beings having a nice life, being functional and sustainable, we need to work with nature. We need to create systems and ways of distributing, ways of creating resources and ways of distributing resources that support the most amount of people, that provide the most amount of people with the nicest amount of life for the lowest amount of destruction and chaos. In real reality, that is the upright system. Consumption and production are done as a means to an end of creating an enjoyable life experience for as many lives as possible. If we had a societal system that was based on reality, that was based on pragmatism, that was based on what does the human being and life in general want, and how do we create that, we would surmise, we would come to the conclusion, right? We all want a pleasant environment. We all want our needs to be met to the degree that we can then connect with each other and express ourselves. That is what we want. That is what every plant wants. That's what every animal wants. We want to pass on our genes. We want to pass on our expression. We want to have some connection. And again, we would understand then that we need resources, right? We need infrastructure, we need food, we need clothing, we need shelter, we need ways of communicating with one another, we need transportation, we need distribution, we need, agriculture, cultivation, all of these things. And there are, some pretty complex systems that we have created, like the internet and the way that we're communicating right now, books, like all of these things that really do enhance our experience of these being alive, right? And if we can understand that stuff, again, is not what has value. Books, clothing, shelter, food is not inherently valuable. It is valuable because it supports life. It is valuable because it supports life. Yes? And we can understand that in order to create these things, we do need to work. Okay, so this is the first thing with this talk of finding our enough that most people freak out. And I want to make it very clear that no one is saying we should all just quit our jobs and lay on the beach and be naked and eat fruit and expect that that's going to be fine. Because it isn't. Yes, we are a big society. We are a complex society with complex needs. We are going to have to consume and produce on some level in order to create the things that provide a pragmatic experience of an enough life for large groups of people. There is no just sitting around and life just taking care of itself. Yes? We still need people who are growing our food. We still need people who are working the cash register at our grocery stores. We still need doctors and nurses and holistic healthcare practitioners. We still need people to build houses. We still need engineers. We still need, quote unquote, right? We still need people to do the functional societal work to create a functional society. So, number one, right off the bat, no one is saying that in order to live a good life, we should all just quit our jobs and fuck productivity and everyone just lay around and do nothing. Because that's not pragmatic. That won't work. That won't work to create a nice life for us. Okay? However, in our society and in our culture, we have taken the idea that work is valuable, that productivity is valuable, that consumption is valuable, past its pragmatic outcomes. We are living in an inverted system where instead of realizing that production should be a means to an end to create as much of a good life for as many people as possible. That is, in real reality, the point of production. Making enough things so that most people in society can be secure, have a good life, express themselves, and connect, while not destroying the planet that we live on, because we have to live here. When we take production and we take it outside of that context, and what we have done in the Western world is we have said production for production's sake is valuable. Okay, so this is the first inversion we need to understand when we're asking ourselves, am I living a good enough life or am I stagnant? We first need to understand that the first inversion that we are living in under capitalism is that production is always a good thing. That exponential growth of production is always a good thing. And exponential growth of consumption is always a good thing. Because again, in order for corporations to continue to make money every single quarter, more than they made in the last quarter, they need to increase both production and consumption. Yes? In order to make more profit, you have to provide more of your product, or you have to increase the price of your product, and more people have to be consuming it more of the time. Yes? There comes a point where we don't need any more of what is being produced. In real reality, there comes a point where we are saturated, where we have enough of what you produce. We have enough t-shirts, we have enough apricots, we have enough houses. We don't need to keep increasing how much we are producing. We can keep producing in the sense that we keep making houses, we keep making clothes, but we're not increasing the volume that we're making. We're not doing 100 units this quarter and 200 units next quarter and 300 units, because at some point we realize we've reached a saturation point. We're now at the point of the level of production that we have right now meets the needs of the culture. In a healthy company, in a healthy system, we would say we are going to produce enough of something so that those who need it can have access to it, so that it enhances their life. And then we don't keep increasing production past that point. We don't keep telling people to increase their consumption past the point of what they actually need to be okay, in order that we can continue to produce more, sell more, and have more profit. But this is what we are living in under capitalism. This idea of people, companies need to continually market their thing as you need more of this. However much you're already consuming is not enough, because we need to keep increasing profit margin. So how are we going to do that? We're going to keep increasing what we're making. We're going to keep trying to create false demand. We're going to slightly alter what we make so it's a little bit different, so people will buy both products instead of just one. But there's this constant, we are just going to keep pumping it out and then convincing you, the people, that you need more of it so that we can continue to make profit. That is backwards. That is backwards. That is an inversion. That makes no sense. Because people having a whole bunch of stuff that they don't need does not increase their life value, does not increase the enjoyment of their life, and oftentimes, depending on what we're looking at, it makes us sick, and it makes our environment destroyed, and it leads to extreme amounts of waste. Second inversion is exploiting workers, exploiting the life of the people who are doing the consuming and the producing in order to minimize costs of production and maximize profit. So rather, again, than work being about supporting the good life of the general population, work has now become a competitive market where wages are low, where benefits are low, where working conditions are terrible, and workers are exploited and exploited and exploited and exploited. Paid low wages for their labor, not given what would be adequate for a standard quality of life in exchange for a day's work, because that is cutting costs for corporations in order to create higher profit margins for the company that don't trickle down to the people. So rather than saying, how can we design a way of working that is functional for the human being? How can we produce what we actually need, what is of benefit to all of us, while creating a good life for the people who are doing that producing? We are saying, how much can we suck out of the working class so that we can pay them as little as possible, we can give them as little benefits as possible, we can, and then, in order to pay them as little as possible, usually that is where the terrible working conditions come from. And again, it's robbing people of a good life in order that there be more product, more profit for those at the top. That's another inversion. To sacrifice the worker, to sacrifice life for profits. That's an inversion. It's messed up. Okay? Number 3 is to have our working environment and our environment in general be one of ultra individualism and competition. Another way that those who are at the top of the system keep us functioning in a way where we continue to participate in the system, where we continue to sacrifice ourselves for the system, is in being indoctrinated that what is of value, again, is luxury, wealth, and excess. And that in order to have these things, you must earn them through labor. Now again, right, to a degree this is true. To a degree, we would need to work together as a society and function with work in order to create the conditions where we all have enough food and shelter and safety and access and resource. No one is saying again that we shouldn't work. But what we are saying is that there is no reason, there is no functional reason why we should live in a culture where we have literal billionaires. Like I said, people who have so much wealth, so much access, so much privilege that they will never be able to use all of it, even if they give it away for generations and generations and generations. While large swaths of the population starve, don't have health care, don't have access to what they need, don't have access to community, are in communities where they are being antagonized so that they can be criminalized and then their labor can be exploited. All of these things are happening because we are continually being indoctrinated that if you don't have extreme wealth, it is because you are lazy and you are not working hard enough and you are not doing what you should be doing. That any individual who is making good choices is going to have access to wealth, to privilege, to opportunity. And anybody who isn't, they are doing it to themselves. That is the third inversion of our culture that is out of alignment with reality. In real reality, our systems are not set up so that everyone can just make good choices and have what they need. Our society is not set up in a way where we all have equal access to education, where we all have equal access to healthcare, where we all have equal access to opportunities to grow and change, where we are all invested in equally. Rather, we have a very wealthy class who is being invested in by literally the entire society. So even this idea that those at the top are there because they are individuals who produced more than everyone else and are deserving of being there, this is literally never true. Those at the top of our system have been the most invested in. They were usually born into situations where they were already rich because their families worked for these systems that exploited labor, that artificially increased the price of their good or service in order to create more profit for themselves, that did not pay their workers fairly, that exploited in order to make that profit, and then they invested it in their children. And then those children got to go to university, they got to have access to people who are in high places, who could give them opportunities. They were given access to all of the best things that society has to offer: food, shelter, safety, technology. They were heavily invested in. And this is something that we just tend not to understand. We are deeply, again, indoctrinated that those at the top of the system just like pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got themselves there through hard work. And even if that is true, even if they worked hard, even if they did what they did, we need to understand that they did that within a context of having been heavily invested in by society, by culture. Their workers literally had less money for themselves to create a nice life. so that those people at the top of the system could have money and resources to do what they did. They were invested in by the community. And we need to understand this. This is how wealth is being distributed right now, not fairly. So those at the top of the system continually have an advantage over everybody else. And then they brainwash us into saying, well, no, we're all just working hard. This is a free market economy. If you want to work harder, you can make more money, and then you can have all the things that you want. And then they vilify any social programs, any, like I say, like universal health care. They vilify childcare. They vilify any of these things. And they say it's going to decrease your wage, right? If we did all of these things to make working conditions so that people who are working are pretty much guaranteed a basic quality of life, you're going to have a lower wage, because we're going to have to take it out of your wage in order to give you health care, and in order to give you, reasonable hours, and in order to give you childcare, and in order to give you transportation, or whatever it is. But the real reality is that this is not true. Number one, no, you don't. You absolutely don't have to take it out of their wages. You're a billionaire. The people at the top of our companies do not need to be taking home $1 million paychecks every quarter. That's the first thing. In order to provide fair and reasonable life to every worker in America, every worker in Canada, we could decrease the profit margins of the CEOs of those companies by 10 or 20%, and it would more than cover basic costs of need for the workers. And then even if you had to take a cut in your salary, if we had a system that was guaranteeing you take a cut in your salary, but in exchange for that, you get health care, you get working conditions that are reasonable, you get these things that that give you a good life, you would have been spending that increased profit on those things anyways. It's not really decreasing your wage. It's not really decreasing your wage. It's just reinvesting your wage in something that gives you a good life. So you don't have to do that for yourself. That's all that would be. People often completely misunderstand what socialism is, and they think it's just higher taxes to the government. And if that's what it was, and especially like in Canada and the United States, I understand the distrust of higher taxes, because right now, most of our tax money doesn't go back to the people. It doesn't go back to infrastructure. It doesn't go back to healthcare. It doesn't go back to housing. It doesn't go back to all of these things. It goes into the military-industrial complex. So of course, we're like, I don't fucking want that. I don't trust that at all. Yeah, that makes sense. But why? Why does all of our tax money go into the military-industrial complex? Because war is incredibly profitable. Because creating militaries and creating weapons and fighting these wars is one of the fastest ways that a country can make money. And in a capitalist society where we have for-profit war, this is why there's so much of a heavy investment. This is part of the reason why in the industrial military complex. Because it's profitable. Because again, we have zero regard for human life, and we're inverting it to say what is going to increase profit margin the most. We don't trust our politicians. We don't trust our medicine. We don't trust any of our educational institutions for this very reason. Because they are all working under the umbrella of what is going to create the highest profit margin for the owners of the means of production. So our for-profit medical system, for-profit war system, for-profit education systems. They need to keep people indoctrinated into this inverted system. They need to keep people in a state of manufactured discontent, which my definition of manufactured discontent is either continually believing that you don't have enough and you're not producing enough, even when you do and even when you have. To continually create this feeling of you are not good enough, you don't fit in, you are not on trend, you do not have enough, you are not doing enough, you are never good enough. So that you will continue to produce more than you need to produce and to consume more than you need to consume in order to try to fill that void is the first half of manufactured discontent. The fact that all of us constantly feel inadequate, that trends are always changing. What is good enough, what is right, what is in is always changing, is because in order to keep us in a state where we will continue to participate in the exponential consumption and production that is destroying us but good for corporations, we need to be brainwashed. We need to be brainwashed into doing these things. And we are. We are brainwashed via the threat of being excluded. This is where self-love work comes in to social justice revolution. When we are all walking around hating ourselves and believing that we are not good enough and believing that we are not smart enough and believing that we are not worthy and not deserving of basic things, we are excellent beings who can be manipulated by the system. We will continue to sacrifice ourselves and compete with one another for shitty work and blame ourselves when we don't have enough. We will continue to believe that we need to do everything by ourselves, and if we're not meeting our own needs and if everything isn't perfect, it's our fault. We're not rich, we're not successful. We need to work harder, we need to consume more, and we will continue to, like I say, compete with one another and judge one another and gatekeep one another to try to keep ourselves safe. That is what self-hate, shame, and guilt actually does. It keeps us in a state of blind consumption and production. And then the other half of manufactured discontent is, again, the fact that we have so much wealth in the Western world. We have so much wealth, so much resource, so much capacity to distribute, so much ability to create a good life for everybody, and the fact that we choose not to. We choose not to. Corporations choose not to. They choose to exploit their labor. They choose to gatekeep who gets to go to university, who gets an education, who has access to what, creating actual discontent and not enough for large portions of the population, who are then vulnerable and dependent on the system. So they will continue to sacrifice themselves and be sacrificed and then be blamed for that in order to feed the system. People will continue to be criminalized and then their labor is exploited. People will continue to have low access to upwards mobility in life and be blamed for that. They take away your right for family planning. They take away your ability to control your own life. And that's how they use you for profit. That is the inverted system we live in. So most of us who are listening to this, who are in the sort of middle class, we have to understand that we are living in a classist society. Classist, not classless. And this is part of the reason we all feel so shitty about ourselves all the time. Okay? This is why in my mystery school, there's a whole third curriculum about how this self-love work leads into social justice revolution. Because as we start to realize and recognize why we actually have the anxiety, the depression, the self-hate that we have, we are going to start to realize that it is in a large part due to the fact that we live in a system that's completely unsustainable, that's completely inverted from actual pragmatic reality. The systems that we have are completely inverted from actual pragmatic reality. We are consuming and producing as though those are the things that have inherent value, and we are sacrificing life in order to do that consumption and production. We are manipulating life over and over and over and over again into believing that it is not worthy, it is not good enough, it is not enough. So that you continue to feel like anytime you don't have enough in your life, anytime you have pain, you have shame and guilt instead of what is going on. And then that second thing is the constant fear of being kicked out, the constant fear of not fitting in is being triggered in us over and over and over and over and over again by design, so that we will stay in this state of fear where we continue to sacrifice ourselves for the system instead of realizing that we are not inherently evil, that we are not inherently not good enough, that we are not inherently the reason that we are suffering. That a large part of our suffering is because of the way the systems are set up. They are set up so that people will suffer, so that they will continue to blame themselves and then sacrifice themselves so that more profit will be made for those at the top. We are indoctrinated into an inverted culture. When we look at the blue zones, and if you want to look that up, just Google the blue zones. You don't have to ask me. Blue zones. Google the blue zones. There are several things that these places all have in common. Number one, they are highly resourced. So the blue zones are places on the planet where people tend to live long lives, where people tend to live long and healthy lives. One is in Okinawa, one is in Costa Rica, there's one in the Seventh-day Adventist community in California. They're all over the earth. And a lot of people have tried to capitalize on this idea and been like, what's their diet like? And what's their daily sleep routine? And blah, blah, blah. And we're trying to figure out why their health is so good based on like their eating and their like sleep habits. And it's like, this is not why the people in the blue zones are living so long. Again, the thing that is actually making these communities live so long is they are highly resourced, meaning they're not under a lot of stress of, am I going to get my needs met? They have lots of food, they have lots of shelter, they have environmental conditions that are sustainable for living. They are highly resourced areas of the planet. They are highly isolated. These communities are small communities. And what that means in terms of human psychology and how we act is that there's not a lot of people coming in and there's not a lot of people going out. So that automatically decreases the idea of threat, because that's just how we function. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's what we should strive for. What I'm saying is that when we live in isolated communities, we tend to feel safe in our little isolated community because we know everyone. We can predict what's going to be happening. Okay? And then everyone in the community is viewed as part of the community. This is really the big key here. Well, the second big key. In these blue zones, people treat each other as a community. They're not dependent on corporations. They're not all acting individually. They live as a unit. When this person needs something, the community shows up for them. When these people have more, they show up for their community more. And everybody plays and everybody wins. The cooperation model works so much better than the competition model. From there, they work just enough to meet their needs, and then they spend the rest of their time socializing and enjoying themselves. Okay, so again, it's not about being lazy. It's not about never innovating. It's not about literally just doing the absolute bare minimum and then everyone is just like scraping by. Because that's what I think a lot of us think when I say we need to have an enough society. We're not talking about everyone just scraping by. We're talking about producing enough that everyone has enough and they're comfortable, and then not going any farther than that. Okay? There's a big difference between exponential consumption and production, which is completely destructive, and doing just the bare minimum so we're just scraping by, and then if anything happens, we don't have a safety net. We're not talking about either of these things. Okay? When I say enough, I am saying the middle ground, where we are producing enough so that we are safe enough. It is good enough. There's relative security, and then not more than that. So we are going for an enjoyable life. We're not going for the bare minimum so we can say we're the most minimalist we've ever been, unless that brings you joy. We're saying we're producing enough that we can live comfortably. And these places have this figured out. They live comfortably. They do just enough work to live comfortably. And then, like I said, they enjoy the rest of the time. Okay, I love this, but for some people, enough is 100 million. Again, those people are indoctrinated. And this is what we need to understand. That is not real reality. Okay? So again, the blue zones have it figured out in that they are living in alignment with real reality. Our millionaires and our billionaires, their perception is totally skewed. And we need to understand this. The fact that they are able to hoard the wealth that they are hoarding, the fact that they literally will rocket themselves into space and they're trying to eject themselves from our planet, the fact that they literally are the kind of in the mindset of like, we need to do whatever we need to do to save ourselves and fuck everyone else. The fact that they do not see that they have enough. Because again, this is not up for debate. This is not a matter of opinion. Enough is something that is pragmatic. We are humans with needs that we can measure. There is a reality here. And this, again, is why this work can be so difficult. Because we are not used to looking for what real reality is. We are used to opinion and consensus reality. This is why, again, my mystery school is so long. Because breaking out of consensus reality to actually see real reality takes a lot of deprogramming. Because we are conditioned to be in consensus reality, which is how things look versus how they are. Which is what we're told to believe is happening versus what is actually happening. So we know for a fact that our millionaires and billionaires have enough. They do not need more. They do not need $100 million. They don't need that. That's something they want, and it's something they have a perception. It's a perception that they need it to be safe, but it is not real reality. Okay? Yes, especially if you're being told you have limiting beliefs if you don't invest. No, it's not a belief system. How much we need is not a belief. Right? Like how much calcium your body needs is not a belief. It's a measurable amount. When we have too little, there's destruction. When we have too much, there's destruction. It's measurable. Our needs as human beings are maybe a little bit grayer than that, but they're not gray enough that some people need $100 million and other people are living fine, like just above the poverty line. We're not that different. So this is not about need. This is about want, and this is about incorrect perception. It is my belief that those who are at the top of our systems are operating from a lower level of consciousness than other people. I do not believe they are more intelligent or that they have it more figured out. I believe they are operating from a lower level intention and from a misunderstanding of reality. Because again, in order to be willing to sacrifice that much of life, of the environment and of human life to get that rich, and to still believe you need more, to still believe you should hoard, to still believe that you should be able to dictate for people how their life is, right? So like billionaire philanthropy. I'm going to exploit millions of people and labor and the planet to become a billionaire. And then I'm going to turn around and give some of that back to some people in a way that I deem appropriate. Is not philanthropy. That's dictatorship. But that's what we have right now. And we need to again understand that we're being told that this is what a good enough life is. Continual increase in your profits, continual increase in your buying power, and continual increase in your production. And it's everywhere. It's in the self-help world, it's in the spirituality world, it's in all of these things, in religion. Are you continually giving more to the church than you gave last week? Are you doing more? Are you sacrificing yourself more? In your spirituality, are you growing more? Are you going on that next retreat? Are you finding the next level of awakening? Are you meditating longer than your friends? In the self-help and personal growth, right? Are you owning your value enough that you're reaching all your goals and you constantly have new goals and you constantly have more that you should be doing and more that you should be producing and more that you should be consuming? And it goes, again, beyond what would pragmatically make your life better. Okay? So again, there are goals that we have that when we reach them, they actually make our lives better. And those are good goals, right? Like learning how to communicate more effectively so that you can have better, more functional relationship. That's a great goal. That's something to strive towards. And if we have stagnancy in that area of our life, of course, we can say, okay, maybe I need to kick it up a little bit. Maybe I need to read a book. Maybe I need to get some counseling. Maybe I need to work through the mystery school, whatever it is. There's a stagnancy in an area of my life that when I actually improve this, it's going to improve my quality of life. Versus, I'm making enough money. I have a comfortable place to live. I can afford food. I can afford little luxuries and enjoy myself. But I don't have the latest handbag. I don't have the latest car. I should be getting a bigger apartment. I should be getting blah, blah. That is manufactured discontent. That is excess, where you are being manipulated. Your life is fine. You're fine. You don't need more. Stay there. This is the difference between living an enough life and being stagnant and growing for no reason. We, again, as a culture, are disconnected from reality. That's, again, why I teach the self-love path the way that I teach it. Because we do have to start with ourselves. We have to start with reconnecting to our feelings and our bodies and our empathy and our emotions, because these are the things that connect us to real reality. The mind can be convinced of anything, and that is obviously clear, right? People out there with hundreds of millions of dollars still believing they don't have enough. That's insane in real reality, but we believe it because the mind has been indoctrinated into this system of competition and threat and excess so much. And in order to do that, in order to live that life, we have to be disconnected from our emotions. We have to be disconnected from our humanity. This is why I say billionaires have to be disconnected from their humanity. In order to exploit that much, and in order to hoard that much, you have to be denying the reality of how much pain you are causing to be where you are. So the reason that they are all up there just trying to defend themselves and in a constant state of fear, which is what I believe we are seeing with the continual hoarding and the continual exploitation and the continual we're just going to eject ourselves from this, that is fear. That is deep lizard brain. I know that's an outdated concept now, but I feel like it gets the point across. Disconnection from their humanity. Yeah? They see threat everywhere they go. And that is out of alignment with reality. And then they turn around and, like I say, they indoctrinate all of us to be equally disconnected from our humanity. Have you ever wondered why emotions are so deeply pathologized in our system? Why anxiety and depression that comes from, so again, not all anxiety and not all depression comes from our system. Some people have chemical imbalances. There are lots of reasons we can get depressed. But also, a lot of us are depressed and anxious because keeping up in this system is anti-humane. What we have to do to work as much as we're expected to work, to keep up with what we're expected to keep up with, to constantly be in that state of fear of, am I going to get kicked out? Am I going to be misunderstood? Am I going to be rejected? Is so stressful. It's normalized, so we don't see it. It's so stressful, we don't feel good, and then we are blamed. We are told that we have a pathology of anxiety and depression. There's something wrong with us, that we can't keep up, that we can't do it, that we're not doing enough. And then self-help and personal growth and big pharma all come in and say, don't worry, we can fix you. We can make you more productive. We can help you disconnect from your body and your brain and your emotions more with medications or whatever, spiritual retreats that will disconnect you from your pain more so that you will be more productive. And again, I'm not anti-medication. Not at all. Some people need it. This is complex and this is nuanced. And there is a lot of similarity between us humans because we're not that different from one another. The fact that anxiety and depression rates are increasing exponentially definitely has something to do with the fact that our systems ask us to sacrifice our humanity. And that sacrifice, the amount we have to sacrifice is increasing with every generation. It's increasing with every generation. What we sacrifice and what we get in return for that sacrifice is decreasing with every generation. The generation before us could sacrifice themselves and get a job and then have a great retirement. The generation after me, they're not even going to be able to buy a house. They're not going to be able to invest in their future. Because the exploitation level has to keep rising in order for profits to continue to rise. With every successive generation, more corners need to be cut, more people need to be sacrificed. And the way that they do that is, again, by continually blaming. How many stories have you heard about Gen Z being lazy and stupid and broken and just mentally ill? You're being indoctrinated to blame them for the systems that they're stepping into that are completely unfair. That's what that is. So like I said, this is why the self-love path starts with reconnecting to our humanity, reconnecting to our pain, and getting to a point where we can finally start to question the shame and the guilt that tell us that we're not enough, we're not good enough, and we're not doing enough, and that our pain is our fault. Because when we can start to see past those stories, then we start to see how the system is actually set up. Then we start to see how we can actually create enough, how we can stop being so dependent on the approval and love of everyone else. And we can start to figure out what an enough life looks like. And we can do that. And we can then find an actual comfortable way of living. Then we can be community focused. We can be community minded. We don't have to keep hoarding for ourselves. We start to depend less and less on corporations as we invest more and more of ourselves into our communities. People always ask me, like, how do we change the system? Number one, find your enough. Stop consuming more than you need to consume. Stop producing more than you need to produce. Stop believing that there is something inherently flawed about you. And start to understand where you can really grow in a way that will be pragmatically good for you and the planet, and where you are just being indoctrinated. Work on your shame and your guilt, understanding that they are always lies. So what does your body actually want, and what does your body actually need, and what are your emotions actually telling you? Find your enough, and then stay there. Enjoy your life. Enjoy enough. Understand that more luxury and more wealth is an indoctrination. It does not make us happier. It does not make us healthier. It just means we have to sacrifice ourselves more or rely on the sacrifice of someone else to create that for ourselves. So are you truly stagnant in your life? Well, again, is the discontent you're feeling coming from an actual lack of resource or growth or personal expansion? And if so, where is your participation in that? Right? Again, we all have things we can grow into. Part of living a life-generating life is that we are all going to be growing. We're going to be changing. We're going to be expanding. But if all of your growth, change, and expansion is around your consumption and your production, you know you're being indoctrinated instead of actually finding real solutions. So looking for where your discontent is actually coming from. Is it a systemic issue? Is it something you can do something about? And that is also complex. Because again, a lot of us are doing everything we can and we are not making ends meet, and it's systemic. And then we need to ask for help. Some of us don't have enough, and it's because we could do more. But again, like, right, this is individual. And so there's no blanket statement for everyone should do this and everyone should do that. We need to decide for ourselves. And that's why, again, I offer the mystery school the way that I do. I offer these videos. I do all this stuff. Because picking apart what is the indoctrination and what is actually my power is not easy. I can't tell you it in one video. But hopefully this is helping you to understand why taking this self-love journey is so important if you do want a good life. Because doing this work to detangle yourself from the indoctrination of our culture is the way to understand where your enough actually is and how to get there. How to grow where you really do need to grow, and how to stay where you really are happy to stay. It's not simple and it's not easy. But again, by reconnecting to our humanity and understanding our shame and our guilt for what they really are, which is lies, this is how we start this process, and it's a process. But I hope that this helps you start to see and expand beyond your shame and your guilt if you have it right now. If you feel like you're not good enough. And again, right, like, you have to remember it's everywhere. Like, there's like a huge spike in fundamental religion right now. And I can't see that other than an indoctrination. Because what does fundamentalist religion usually promote? That we are inherently broken, bad, wrong, and sinful. And so long as we continue to believe that, we will continue to sacrifice ourselves for the system. I want us to be really, really conscious of anything that is trying to convince us that we are inherently shameful or sinful or in need of saving. Because that is part of the indoctrination that keeps us obsessively consuming and producing despite what is actually healthy for us and the planet. It's a part of the system, it's not separate from the system. So anything that tells you that you are inherently unworthy how you are, that needs to be a ping in your mind of that is indoctrination. It doesn't mean we don't need to grow. It doesn't mean we don't have flaws. It doesn't mean that we might not be making mistakes in all of these things. But that is never because you are inherently fucked up. It's because you are adapting to a system that's fucked up. And learning new ways is hard. But it starts with self-compassion and it starts with curiosity. So long as you're trying to fix yourself, you're off the path. Because you're not broken. There may be parts of you who are immature, that are getting your needs met in the only ways you know how, that were traumatized, that again, it's not even necessarily trauma. It's just the way the system is set up means we all have to operate in these ways that are out of alignment with reality because the system is out of alignment with reality. So we do the work to come back to what reality actually is through our self-love work, and then it expands out for us to see the system and how we can find our enough and stop participating in it. It's not about moving out into the jungle and never interacting with humans again. Again, black and white thinking. It's about where is your enough, and then you don't keep going past that. That is how you rebel from the system. Okay? Okay. So are you really stagnant, or are you just living a good enough life that everyone is telling you is not good enough because it's not continually, perpetually increasing profit margins for corporations? I want you to start asking yourself that question. Start with that. Start to look through that lens. Is it pragmatic that I need this thing? Or is this about corporate profit? And when we put it that way, it makes it a lot clearer. Okay? So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I love hearing from you. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video, whenever I see you. Come join the mystery school. We unpack all of this. It's very deep and complex and takes forever, but it's great because you don't have to get to the end before you start to see changes. Like, this is about continual evolution. The more you see, the more you change, the more you get, the more you can find peace. It's not something you have to get to and then it works. It works along the way. You are not inherently bad, wrong, shameful, or sinful. So if we start from that, what's the truth? Okay? Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'll see you later.